Good evening all. Welcome to this audit committee of Tuesday the 18th of March. We are expecting Gurpreet Julie from BDO, and are we still waiting for Jennifer Norman from Mazars? Just to highlight that there are some traffic issues at the moment in the surrounding area, and I think they've been caught up in that. So what I'm going to do is maybe move the agenda around a bit so that we can deal with some of the other items and give them time to get here. So before we start, do we have any apologies for absence? Yes, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Greensmith is unsurprisingly caught in traffic, so she sends her apologies and will be here as soon as she can.
Thank you very much. And we've had apologies for Councillor Ruth Strong. Thank you, Councillor Hunt. So we'll move to the next item then, to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of February. Any comments on the minutes before I move them? They look quite straightforward. Yes, Jonathan?
Just a minor thing on page 7. I noticed it was the external auditors introduced the report rather than the internal auditors, so just a minor amendment there. So,
are we happy to accept that? Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm happy to move the minutes from the chair as a true and accurate record with the change suggested. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hunt, thank you very much. So all those in favour, yeah? Thank you. Item 3 then, are there any declarations of interest from members? None, thank you. So I've just noticed that, Gurpreet, you've arrived. Do you want to just get your papers out? Yeah, well, what I'll do then is I'll go to another item first and then we'll come over to you in a sec. So we'll take item 6 then, the Local Code of Corporate Governance. This is a report of the Monitoring Officer, and Fran Wiley to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So committee will be familiar with this report. It's a report that's brought annually to Audit Committee, and it sets out the Council's Local Code of Corporate Governance. So essentially it's based on the SIP for Solace framework for good governance and the core principles that are contained within that. It's the document that sets out what governance processes, structures, strategies, etc. have in place to support good governance across the organisation in line with those principles. It supports the Council's annual governance statement, which goes along with the statement of accounts. Every year, this document is reviewed by senior leadership team and by assistant directors, so that they can ensure that any measures taken within their service areas are included in this to show how we've improved governance or what actions have been taken over the previous year. As you can see from the appendices, the changes to the Local Code of Corporate Governance for 25-26 are shown in track changes, so it's quite clear you can see where the updates are. I've summarised some of those in paragraph 2.1 of the report. I think it's safe to say there has been a lot of work going on in the governance space over the last year, and this has really been driven as well by quite a significant restructure across the senior management levels of the organisation. In terms of the activity that's been undertaken, we've had a review of our arrangements for members' Code of Conduct complaints, and that's actually been taken to Standards Committee on Thursday to be approved. We've had a new fees and charges strategy prepared, which is being taken to Cabinet tomorrow for approval. We have a new governance structure, which aligns with the senior management restructure, which is appended to the report at Appendix 2. But again, it really puts a real focus around governance. So you can see we've got a budget and performance board. We've got our business technology and design authority, which looks at system implementation and change across the organisation. And we've also got our corporate risk board. So a real focus on those kind of governance strands in the organisation and making sure that there is better oversight of those across the organisation. We've created this year an annual delivery plan. So this replaces our previous service plans, and the annual delivery plan is very much focused on the council's priorities and making sure that we are delivering on those and that is effectively reported through Cabinet and indeed Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We have implemented our new risk management strategy, and committee will have seen over the last couple of quarters the change in the way that we present risk to you as a committee and how that is tracked. That's now done through our Ideagen performance management system. And I know we're coming on to risk later, but I think certainly in this reporting on Q3, it's been evident to Tina and myself that the programme's really starting to work. So the alignment of risk through departments, through to the corporate risk register, the oversight of that and the production of those reports to you is now becoming a much more streamlined process, and it's giving us a much better oversight of risk across the organisation, which was what that risk framework was aiming to achieve. And so we're really pleased with the way that's progressing. There is some more to do, but really, really positive work in that space. Obviously, this year we saw the appointment of an independent member to our audit committee. Jonathan joined us this year, and that's a positive step forward in our governance arrangements. I've already mentioned that there's been quite a significant change to senior management, and that's to ensure that we have better capacity to deliver what we need to deliver and to ensure good governance through the organisation. We had new contract and procurement rules that were adopted by Council in January. The Procurement Act went live in February. We've done a complete review of our procurement function. Our procurement strategy is going to Cabinet tomorrow. I'm confused on the days. It's usually a Thursday, but it's going tomorrow. We have finalised arrangements with our new procurement partner, and they will be starting work with us next week. We've also appointed a procurement and contract manager in-house, again, to better oversee the management of our contracts, to make sure that we are monitoring spend, to make sure that we are engaging local suppliers, to make sure that we're getting social value through the delivery of our contracts, and just all-round better governance around procurement and contracts. We are currently out for consultation on a corporate consultation strategy. So what we're trying to do is align our approach to consultation across the organisation, make sure that we're complying with our public sector equality duty, make sure we're reaching the people that we need to reach with the right consultations in the right way at the right times. So that's currently out for consultation at the moment. And finally, we have recently acquired our new waste and parks software management system, which is going to be a huge change to the way that we are working within our depot services. Again, will provide much better oversight and control over the way our rounds operate, the way we deal with missed bins, the way we tackle assisted collections, and just huge improvements in the way that the service is monitored and performance is monitored as well. So some really positive stuff happening in the last year, which is reflected through the Code of Governance, and lots of work going on into next year. And again, that's highlighted. So we've got further work to do around our fraud and corruption strategy, external funding guidance, adoption of that corporate consultation process once we get feedback on that. We're reviewing our emergency planning arrangements, reviewing cyber risk, and creating a robust social value policy. We're also doing some work next year around asset management. We currently don't have an asset management strategy or system, which is something that's in our annual delivery plan for 25-26. So lots of work has been done, lots of work to do next year. But overall, I think a positive direction for travel in relation to governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. Can we now move to asking members if you have any comments or questions for Fran on this item? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Just to really say, I think it shows that we are making positive forward progress, and I hope that improves the governance over the next 2, 3, 4 years, however long we've got left. And we can look forward to seeing more positive governance reports coming out of Audit, coming to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Any other comments or questions from members? Jonathan?
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question, probably a question for Tina maybe. On page 62, it's been mentioned about the changes in the Council's financial management system for 25-26, ensuring better security control. Can you just outline to the committee what those improvements will be?
put my mic on, you might be able to hear me. So the first thing that we need to do by July 25 is migrate the core financial system to the cloud. We can't make any changes to the system until we've actually done that, because our current provider has stopped providing on-premises versions. So that's the first thing we need to do. Once we've done that, we're going to be looking at a number of implementations and improvements to the system, particularly around budget management, so that there is more ownership for budget managers through self-serve and dashboards. It means that we can take away some of the fixes that we've put in place from the recent fraud. If you remember, we had to put in some interim fixes around having that segregation of duties. We'll be able to streamline those and have end-to-end processes, which means that there is we've got those end-to-end processes, so we don't have to have that individual person being involved in some system, some processes. They'll be automated. So it's generally things like that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. Could somebody give me a little bit more detail about the 5 boards that are going to be formed on page 68 of the bundle at Appendix 2?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, I find it difficult to say the name of this project, believe it or not, but it's called Making Meetings Matter, which is like... so again, one of the things that we'd identified across the council is that senior officers were spending an awful lot of time in meetings that overlapped in terms of their function and their need, and that what we needed to be is more focused in our approach, have more productive meetings that are really focused on key areas across the organisation. So I'd already reflected on, I suppose, the kind of governance boards which have been set up. So rather than every single thing going through SLT hears the stuff it absolutely needs to hear, and then the boards sit kind of underneath that and deal with, I suppose, more of the information. So we've got the Connected Council Board, which is actually SLT as well, the Budget and Performance Board, which is a mixture of, Tina, and our Assistant Director of Workforce and other Assistant Directors across the organisation. So they're tracking the performance against budget, so making sure that we're staying aligned with where we're supposed to be. Then we have the Corporate Risk Board, which we had an initial sort of inaugural meeting, which was just Tina and I, but that was just really focusing on looking at the departmental risks on the system, seeing where they've increased, decreased, changed, and how that impacts then on the corporate risk register. Sort of being brought into that group as well, we'll be focusing more around our corporate health and safety risks. So again, they're all being fed through one place so that everybody is aware of what's going on. And then finally, the Business and Technical Design Authority, that group is really set up to make sure that ICT, procurement, and the wider services are aware of where there are changes to systems. So where we might be acquiring new digital solutions, that we don't end up with hundreds of different digital solutions doing the same thing, that everything is filtering through one place. So we know which systems that we're buying, whether we need to buy it, whether actually we can use this system to do that, making sure that we're buying systems that are safe and secure in terms of reaching a certain ISO standard, and making sure that ICT are aware so they can track new system acquisition through their programs, so they're not suddenly overwhelmed with a project over here that's flying in from left field that they haven't programmed and organised capacity for. So that's the purpose of that one. The boards that sit underneath are the ones in red on the document. They're linked to our annual delivery plan. So I talked about how this year we've got an annual delivery plan as opposed to lots of separate service plans for each service area. Now those boards link to those annual delivery plans and the projects that sit within those plans. So those boards are set up to make sure that we are delivering what we've said we're going to deliver in our annual delivery plan. So, for example, the Depot Modernisation Portfolio Board. So sitting in that, you've got the new waste management and parks software system, which I've talked about. You've got improvements to the depot facility itself. So we've got a project running at the moment to demolish one of the large sheds down at the depot. Coming under that, you've got things like staffing restructures. So all the programme of work in depots sits within that team, and they make sure that that programme of work is being delivered, and so on across the different strands of the delivery plan. So the overall idea of this as well links back to the transformation piece, that senior management restructure. As an organisation, we have historically worked very much in silos. That doesn't necessarily support efficient ways of working, or it doesn't necessarily support the good governance that we're striving for, or the improved governance that we're striving for. So that's the purpose of this. It's to try and be more connected, so we all know what's going on, what each other are doing, and that making sure that that does align with the priorities of the council, and that we're not kind of going off and doing things that we don't necessarily have the capacity for, nor that aligns with our objectives or our budget. So I hope that
Thank you very
clarifies it.
much. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions from members? No. Okay, thank you very much. I'm happy to move the recommendations from the Chair that the Local Code of Corporate Governance for 2025-26 to be approved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barnes, thank you. So all those in favour? Yep, that's unanimous, thank you. So we'll move back now then to item 4. This is a report provided by our internal audit partner, BDO, the BDO Progress Report 24-25. I'm going to ask Gurpreet to present the report. I believe we also have Paul Whitworth here, who is our Assistant Director for Housing and Resettlement, and he's here in case members have got any questions or comments on the part of the report. Gurpreet, would you like to take the report from there? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So the first paper is our progress report. So this report gives you a summary of the progress we've made year to date. So there are 2 reports, one that's just been alluded to on temporary accommodation, and then another on equality, diversity and inclusion. So those 2 reports are summarised in the progress report. I'll do a brief summary on those in a moment. There are 4 other reports which are at different stages, but we fully expect to issue those to the June committee along with our annual opinion as well. So we're on track to make sure that that's delivered, because our objective is that the very next committee after the 31st of March, we issue our opinion and any final reports. And so we feel we're on track to deliver against that. And a number of those reviews which I do for June, we're at the fieldwork stage at this point, so we feel comfortable with achieving that come the year end. The other paper that's in this pack, but that will come after we've gone through these reports, is our annual plan for 25-6, but obviously I'll pick that up separately after we've gone through the progress report. In terms of the 2 reviews that are in the plan, what I may suggest, given an officer is here, is I'll summarise temporary accommodation. And if that's okay, Chair, if there's any questions on progress or temporary accommodation, can take them then. And then after we've done that, I can go through equality, diversity, inclusion. Yeah, okay. So the first report in your pack, which is summarised here, is on temporary accommodation. So we've issued a moderate opinion on the design of controls, but a limited opinion on the effectiveness. So temporary accommodation, as many of you will be aware, is obviously a key activity and function of the authority. There is a lot of legislation that sits around this topic area, whether that's the Housing Act, Homelessness Act, Localism Act, and different parts of these all interface with the authority in terms of things that you are required to do legislatively. This review looked at a number of areas, so policies, procedures, structures and governance that's in place around this area, but also just day-to-day sampling. So going to look at those people who may be designated as homeless or who may be placed into temporary accommodation, and looking at whether the authority have followed the necessary and expected arrangements in place, whether that's legislatively or whether that's your own policies and procedures, and whether they are being followed. And it's normally a good indicator as to how things are operating. So as you'll see through the report, we do list out the areas we've reviewed. There is a number of areas of strength as well, and I do think that's important to note, particularly the first one, which is on page 14 of the pack. at the overall pack, but page 5 of the individual report, where it says where we tested 20 cases to see whether you did meet your statutory main homelessness duty. We found that to be the case in all 20, and I think that is a good comfort of assurance for this committee to take. We also found sound arrangements in terms of quarterly budget monitoring with the finance team and other areas which are mentioned in the areas for good practice. The 2 areas of improvement which are driving the opinion in terms of the limited, however, is firstly when we tested temporary accommodation cases, a very large proportion, 19 of the 20 that we tested, we couldn't see evidence in terms of the temporary accommodation properties that had been subject to adequate and timely checks to ensure they meet legal standards. Now, that doesn't mean the local authority haven't done checks to make sure those properties are fit for purpose in terms of maintenance of the building, is what I'm referring to, but we couldn't see evidence to that. And what management have provided here is an action to take forward to make sure that that is evidenced. I should note, we didn't find any instances in what we looked at where we could see that there was a building that had clearly not met standards. We are not building experts, however, but the key for us is that the evidence trail wasn't there. And without that evidence, the local authority wouldn't be able to assure themselves that the buildings are meeting the relevant standards. The second one, similar theme, although a lower level of non-compliance, we tested 20 cases, and in 7 of those, we again could not see evidence of individual assessment of needs. Now, if you have individuals who are with the authority, there are requirements about assessing their needs, and you may need to adapt properties depending on those individuals' needs. And I'm sure we could, give examples of those. Again, for 7 of them, we couldn't identify evidence that that assessment had been done. It may have been, it wasn't documented, and that's why we're raising that as a finding. So it's those 2 findings which are generating the limited on effectiveness. The design is there, the process, the arrangements, but in the sample we found instances of non-compliance, which is driving that limited opinion. So I'll pause there, happy to take questions. Obviously, Officer is here as well on that, or on progress of internal audit before we pick up the Equality, Diversity, Inclusion report.
Thank you. Just before I move to members, I've got some questions myself. I just wanted to ask Paul, if that's okay. Obviously, it's been mentioned in that update that the report identified that the 19 out of the 20 council-owned temporary accommodation properties were lacking the documented evidence of compliance with the legal and safety standards. And I was just, is the evidence there? Is it that it's just somewhere else and we couldn't get it into the audit, or is the work to be done? Is there a plan to deal with this to make sure we have got that evidence?
Thank you for the question, Chair. I'll answer that in two parts. So, yes, there would have been evidence there in the sense of had we wanted to go deeper, we could have provided invoices to show that works have been done. Obviously, when the work was being undertaken, it was felt from my side that we are compliant and we are doing those checks. So the assurances are that, in my view, they are being done, but quite clearly they weren't being documented on the actual cases themselves. Now, the reason that 19 out of 20 came to light is that we did identify this ourselves as a risk last year. So measures were put in place last year to address that, but obviously some of the cases that were identified were pre that work. So what we're doing now is that every time a property becomes void, we're going out and undertaking an analysis of each room individually. There's categories within that, things like damp, if there's any remedial work that needs doing. We're taking some photos if necessary to do that. Obviously, the statutory requirements such as gas checks and things like that, they're done as routine, but we're going to be recording that. And to take this forward, what we're also doing regarding our temporary accommodation stock as a whole is that we're going to be undertaking some surveys on those properties to identify what works need to be done for future. So regarding standards, things like replacing bathrooms, long-term kitchens, things like that, rather than just those day-to-day sort of remedial works that need undertaking. And alongside that, we will be drafting, I've presently done it already, but it just needs to be approved, a policy on maintenance, which will outline what our statutory duties are, as well as what the tenant's responsibilities are and timeframes. So I think that will tighten up the requirements and the the recommendation that's been put forward in this report.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you for that. Councillor Hughes, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Whitworth has actually answered most of the point I was going to raise, because it is concerning that we may not have been carrying out sufficient checks on the quality of the temporary accommodation reviews. I mean, over the last couple of years, there's been a number of high-profile cases around the country where people have suffered ill health as a result of damp and mould and the like. So we obviously have a duty of care. So I'm pleased that we are making sure that we keep the evidence and this is brought forwards. I was wondering, Chair, if once the new policy is finalised, whether it would be appropriate for that to be brought to this committee so that we can see that this serious concern has been addressed.
I can't see that being a problem. Yeah, I can't see that being a problem, Councillor Hughes, so we'll ask for that. Thank you.
So can I just add to that? So prior to this audit, about 18 months ago, we actually created a designated post. So again, we identified, because of the increase in temporary accommodation that the authority has acquired over the past 3 or 4 years. So we're up to 36 units now. We have got a designated officer that is responsible for undertaking this. So this report has obviously helped identify where some of the weaknesses are, and we will be tightening those things up. But to say, we have got a specific officer now that is responsible for that role. So, be assured that we are looking at all health and safety matters, and obviously looking at government changes and legislative changes, because they are, as you've alluded to, because of incidents nationally, there are changes afoot on a regular basis. So we're keeping up to date with those changes as well.
Can you just come back on that? So you were saying that we've got a dedicated officer now for that area. Have they got capacity for the amount of properties that we've taken on?
Well, I think the report has made a recommendation that is looked at. So obviously that's something that we'll be taking away and having a look at, because, yeah, quite clearly, the greater number of properties you've got, the bigger responsibility that arises from that. So, yeah, it's something that we do need to consider moving forward if we are going to increase our temporary accommodation portfolio.
Just on that point.
In terms of budget, just to let the Audit Committee know that as part of the 25-26 budget, Cabinet and Council did approve an additional amount of money for condition surveys on temporary accommodation. So the money is there to be able to do that.
That's welcome news. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful to Councillor Hughes and to you, Chair, for asking 2 of my 3 questions. Just one remains, really. I know it says in the findings that they've not been subject to adequate and timely checks to ensure they meet legal standards. I think I'm asking Mr. Whitworth this question. Does that open us up to, or open the council up to, any kind of legal challenge on that basis?
Potentially, but as I say, I think we could document that those checks have been undertaken. Just to be clear, and I think my colleague has alluded to the fact that we're not saying that they haven't been done. It just wasn't documented. So, we are aware of what our requirements are, and I would be very confident to say that we have undertaken those checks. But clearly, to make it more strategic moving forward, you need to document that those checks have been done. And that will then form part of, hopefully, if we have an asset management property system moving forward, that'll be something that we can record on that system. But at the moment, we will just keep that on sort of spreadsheets, taking that forward at the moment in time.
Any other further comments or questions from members on this bit? Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to congratulate the council, really, on being proactive in the prevention of homelessness in the first instance. And that's for people who are viewing, that's on page 15 of the bundle. I think there's some really good initiatives there.
I think that's all for that section. So would you like to carry on, Gertrude? Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Just also on the final bit on that one, just to assure the committee, we do follow up our recommendations. So we will obviously work with officers to follow this up and bring back to committee any further testing that we've done and any further feedback once these recommendations come due. But yeah. The next report is Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. That was a review in the plan. This is an advisory report, so I do think it frames it differently to some of our other reviews. And as you'll be aware, this is an area that elicits lots of different debate and lots of different discussion, and I think it's probably fair to say there's not necessarily always a right and wrong answer with these things. So BDO apply a framework that we use that goes through a number of different pillars on this area against an authority, although there are many other frameworks out there as well, which I'll talk about in a moment. So we look at the tone from the top in an organisation about how they set the narrative in this area, your governance structures, policies and procedures, and also how you monitor any progress that you may be making against what you see as the standards that you want to have around equality, diversity and inclusion. Now again, similar to the previous area, there are some legal parts to EDI, such as the Equality Act, and all organisations must comply with that. But in today's narrative, there are also a number of different views and spectrums as to how far an organisation may go in terms of promoting EDI, and there are different approaches, and that's why we've done this advisory review to look at some of those areas. The other framework that I mentioned, whilst BDO apply their own framework, there is a local government association framework, and actually against that, and it's really pleasing to see the local authority have self-assessed against this and as achieving status against that framework. And so there are a few slight differences in some of the questions we ask as part of our framework versus the LGA one, but I think the spirit of them are largely similar. So we look against those different pillars, and in doing so, we didn't identify any high findings, and actually the majority of the points that we've raised in terms of advisory points are low findings, and I think that's worth noting, which is a reflection of a lot of the positive things we have seen as part of the work that we've done. There are a number of areas for strength in terms of the inclusion policy that the authority have, which runs until 2027, I believe. There are action plans in place, although I will make one point on that in a moment. And there are governance structures around those action plans. There's training that's in place. And obviously it's been talked about earlier in terms of structure and some of the improvements in structure and governance that have happened in the authority in the last couple of years particularly, and I think that's helped support some of the positive outcomes that we've identified in this report. There are also different forums for staff and others to engage with as well, and some of the recommendations we raise are in those areas. So we do raise some findings which start on page 21 of the report, but as I say, these are advisory ones. These are not ones that we are going to be following up and therefore the authority to take away, but I am pleased to see that they've provided clear management responses to these to try and take these forward. Some of those are around incorporating EDI more into your risk register, because at the moment we feel that that is limited, so that could improve. We feel some of the actions within the action plan could be smarter, i.e. more specific, so that they can be measured. It can be a difficult area to have smart actions, but we do think there are areas that they could be smarter. Trying to get to some more root cause analysis on some of the data that you do capture to then have more targeted actions was another point. And then the final one I'll pick up on was around some of the staff network groups, gigs as they're called, the Gedling Inclusion Group Support, to put in place more protected time for staff, or have considerations around improving the terms of references, etc. And actually, I think some of those have now been completed, reviewed and approved, etc. So the authority have already taken them on board. So overall, we're relatively pleased with where the authority are on this. The Local Government Association framework also indicates the same outcome as well, but we do provide advisory notes here, none of which are high, the majority are low, and happy to take any questions should there be any.
So just before I move to the members, I've got some questions. Just in relation to the sort of the framework that you alluded to there about sort of the LGA's version, and which is the one we seem to be following as an organisation, which would seem correct, really, considering we're a local government authority. So it makes sense. What you're saying is the framework that you use or provide is much bigger or perhaps completely different to what a council would usually have to adhere to. Is that what you're saying, or if that's worded it correctly? I think you probably know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So if I'm being completely candid, I'd have to put them side by side, and we have got an exercise, and I think this audit for us has highlighted that we should put them side by side just to see what the difference is, because we work with, as you may appreciate, a whole host of different sectors. My team focuses on public sector, which also encompasses NHS and some other organisations. Obviously, the LGA and local government have a specific framework. I would suspect that the spirit of them have a number of commonalities across the two, but I would hesitate to say, you know, how much they are different from one another without putting them side by side. But my colleague, Max Armstrong, who some of you would be familiar with, is doing that exercise for us, and we will come back to management just so you have for your assurances, these are the differences. But as this is an advisory review, we're not overly concerned or wedded on the differences. It's actually, in general, this topic area is evolving all the time, and this is a framework we apply to a number of sectors, and there may be useful things here for the authority to take forward given the management responses, but we can do that reconciliation between the two if that's helpful, and we do intend to do that.
Thank you for that answer. Just in terms of the report as well, I noted that there was, I think we've discussed this previously, perhaps this is for you, Fran, that there was the figure of 50.2% of staff have completed the mandatory EDI training, and I know that this has been an issue previously, but I'm just wondering if you can give a verbal update as how we're sort of working towards improving compliance and making sure that our frontline staff have accessed this training.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of, I suppose, frontline staff, we recognise that the online training, which is what we offer kind of as a blanket approach to staff and indeed councillors, wasn't going to work in terms of our leisure staff and our depot staff. We appointed a training manager, because to be fair, it didn't just apply to equalities training, it applied to quite a wide area of mandatory corporate training that we need to make sure that all staff know about. Obviously, some in greater depth than others, but general principles that all staff need to know about. So we appointed a training officer in depot services who is delivering a range of corporate mandatory training to depot staff in small groups in a very different way to the way it's presented, obviously, on the online training or in some of the bigger seminars. What we have identified, though, in relation to EDI is that for this specific area, we don't even think that is enough. We are currently trying to source an external training provider to come in and deliver quite a bespoke training session to our depot staff to make it more, I suppose, more realistic to what they may encounter in their day job, what the behaviour that, the issues that they may come across, the behaviour that we expect from employees. We're probably going to take a similar approach in leisure as well, because again, it's quite a difficult. Delivering training in those areas is quite difficult, because you need to have staff on all the time. Taking them out of their day job to deliver that training is not always straightforward, but we do recognise that they need that training. And you can see in the report that that's one of the recommendations that we've, in terms of management response, we've referenced there, that we're going to get an external provider. We're also looking at something similar on a management level as well, because I think there's probably a higher level of training. One size doesn't necessarily fit all across the whole organisation. So that's something that we're going to be looking at as well next year.
Do members have any comments or questions on this item? Jonathan Corson.
Thank you, Chair. Just really a follow-up on that same section about the mandatory training. Is the mandatory training part of employees' performance reviews? Is that incorporated into it at all?
Yeah, so our approach with mandatory training is that it is mandatory, and if you don't complete it within a specified time frame, then there is it would be brought up as part of a performance management, and potentially, depending on the reasons and the length of time and the compliance, whether or not it's a disciplinary issue as well. So yeah, but it's, I think as well, and this links back to governance. I think one of our issues with training is, again, it was very siloed in terms of how it's being delivered. So our workforce, Assistant Director of Workforce, is currently trying to centralise all training across the whole organisation, aligning it with budgets in a better way as well, so we can make sure that we are giving the right people the right training, both corporately and specifically for their service area. So it is, again, it's something that we do need to improve on. Yeah.
Anything else from members? No? Okay. There isn't anything further to add, is there, Gurpreet? No. I'm happy to move the recommendations from the Chair that members note the progress of the delivery against the 2024-25 internal audit plan, including the executive summary for the following audit reports: temporary accommodation and equality, diversity, inclusion. Do I have a seconder, please? Yeah, Councillor Barnes, thank you. All those in favour? Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you. So we'll move to item 5 then now, please, which is the BDO internal audit plan for 25-26 and 27-28. Again, this is a report of the internal audit partner, BDO. Gurpreet, to present the report, please.
Thank you. So this paper here is our internal audit plan. So this guides the work that we do, and it names the different reviews that we will do over 25-6, but as mentioned, also for the following 2 years as well. So what you'll see on this document, and to give you assurance in the first instance, we have met with and spoke with the senior leadership team, reviewed your risk registers, which are obviously in the pack and the documents today as well, and obviously from our portfolio of local government clients and our experience, added that in to say these are the areas that we think are most pertinent at this time to have within the plan. And we're asking you 2 things. One is to review this plan and provide any commentary if you think this is reflective of what's appropriate. But then 2, there is, and I'll come on to this in a moment, an internal audit charter. It's almost an extension of our contract. We as internal auditors have people who watch us and make sure that we are compliant with internal audit standards. And we have to issue a charter each year and ask committees to review and accept that as well, or ask any questions, but I'll come on to that. In terms of the plan, what you'll see within the document are the various risks from your own risk register, which is often our starting point. I should note in this document, in case anyone eagle-eyed has noted, it's just a timing issue. On the risks on page 15, risk 2 is showing as a net score of 6. I think that's actually now moved up to a 12, which you'll get later in your pack, but it doesn't change our internal audit plan. And then what follows that, from page 17, it shows you the 3 years and the names of the reviews that we intend to do. And then after that table, from page 21, it shows you those individual audits, starting with risk management. It tells you the number of days and the quarter that we intend to complete that work and report it. I think in terms of the plan, the key things to identify is, as internal auditors, what's fundamental to what we report to you is to look at your governance, risk and control. And so 2 of those, risk management and governance, feature in the 25-6 plan, and they're really core areas. And obviously you've heard about improvements in governance, and so we do want to look at that and look at those structures and how they're operating. Risk management, again, is fundamental. Your risk register has updated and improved over the years, so we'd want to look at that. And other key areas like main financial systems, cyber security are also in the plan, and another key areas around people services. We do need to work with management about specifically where that will focus on, whether that's recruitment and retention of staff or in other areas as cited in your risk register. But I feel that the 25-6 plan does cover some pretty key corporate areas for the authority that I think should provide this committee assurance as to arrangements from ourselves. So I'll pause there in terms of the plan, and then the charter does follow that, and hopefully that's relatively self-explanatory in terms of how we remain independent and achieve the various standards. And again, it is worth noting that previously we had to comply with what was SITFA's public sector internal audit standards about how we operate. That changes from the 1st of April to the global internal audit standards for UK public sector. very, very technical. It doesn't change anything day to day in terms of what you will see and feel, but our standards that we operate against, and this is for all internal auditors globally, changes from the 1st of April, and this sets out what those standards are. Happy to take any questions on the plan.
Do members have any comments or questions on the plan? Councillor Bestwick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm sure we're all concerned still about the recent fraud and wanting the council to have a complete clean bill of health on that matter. So I notice it says the risk level remains the same, but there are actions to be completed in Q4, which do you mean financial Q4 as in where we are now? And will we be able to hear a more detailed report on those matters perhaps in 3 months' time? I don't know who wants to answer that.
I can give a first response. It may be management after myself. Obviously, within our plan, what's page 21 of your pack, you'll see a review which says main financial systems with the bracket fraud after it, and that's set for Q1. So we anticipate issuing a report to this committee which focuses on the controls of your financial system, and given what you've alluded to that's happened in recent history, that will be obviously in our minds as we're doing that review, to making sure that we're looking at those controls and assessing if they're now operating effectively. If there are any concerns, we'll be bringing that to this committee. So from an internal audit point of view, there's an insight that you'll receive there, but management may want to add more.
So we're kind of like moving into a bit of the risk scorecard here. So that first risk on the finance risk, so that is high. It's sitting at 9. Because of the nature of that risk itself, it's always going to be high. It's highly unlikely to come down significantly over the medium term, and that's mainly because of the financial situation that we find ourselves in terms of government funding and the amount of efficiencies we have to find in the medium term to balance the budget. So whilst there might be fluctuations quarterly in that risk, it is likely to remain high for the foreseeable future. I don't see that coming down significantly, and I think we kind of like mention that every time we meet, that just by its nature it's going to be high. In terms of the fraud, in terms of the fraud. So we do get an opportunity when we sit down with BDO to have a look at the draft audit plan. We do actually get the ability to focus kind of like some of where we feel as officers those reviews should be. And we asked BDO if they would specifically make sure that the financial audit this next year did focus on fraud, so that we could make sure that we have evidence of those things that BDO identified in that initial report that they did on the core financial systems that followed the fraud. We believe we've made a lot of progress in delivering some of those plans and progress, and I'm hoping that when BDO do their report, which will be in Q1, their audit, we'll be able to evidence that. So you should see some of that coming forwards.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments from members? No, I just wanted to ask in relation to environmental compliance. I think there's reference to it on page 5. Given the new waste regulations, I just wanted to ask how the audit will assess whether the council is meeting its environmental and regulatory obligations in terms of assets. Don't know if that's one for you, Fran.
So in terms of the terms of reference for each specific audit, they're agreed at the point that we engage in the audit process. And certainly I think we could probably look, we'll need to speak to BDO, we can probably look at including something in the asset audit around environmental compliance as part, I'm looking at Gurpreet as I'm saying this, that we can include that as part of the terms of reference, if that's helpful to the committee.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think in earlier this year, to the September committee, we did do a review on carbon management strategy. In all of our terms of references, I know the committee doesn't see those, but with management, we deliberately have a particular box that we have to respond to, which says, does this audit have any impact or have any connection to environmental matters. And we have to then answer that question, because if the audit does somehow intersect with environmental legislation or anything else, it means that it features as part of everything that we do. And so we will continue to do that, and happy to take on Fran's suggestion around those asset reviews as well.
Oh, I hope Councillor Hunt's okay. Someone's just gone to check Councillor Hunt's okay. Thank you. In relation to, I just wanted to ask if, I think this is to you, Fran, in relation to cyber security measures, obviously the report highlights cyber security as a key area of focus. I just wanted to sort of put it on record, really, that we will be looking at specific vulnerabilities that have been identified as a committee, but just to confirm that this will still be done in private session, obviously due to the risk to the council of exposing us to that issue in that area.
And again, linking back to the risk scorecard, you can see there's some actions in the ICT category around cybersecurity risk register and looking at where we might need to take mitigatory action. So it is in the work programme, yeah.
Okay, if members have got no more questions or comments, I will move on. I'm happy again to move the recommendation from the chair that we approve the internal audit plan for 25-26 to 27-28. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Barnes, thank you. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. So we did item 6 earlier, so we'll jump now to item 7, the risk scorecard quarter 3, 24 to 25. This is a report of the Chief Finance Officer, Finance and Section 151 Officer, Tina Adams. Please, would you present? Oh, it's not, it's Fran again. Sorry, yes, thank you. Just to confuse me.
A bit of a tag team on risk, so yes, this one's me again. So obviously I reported earlier in the committee under the Code of Governance the work that's been undertaken against the risk framework and improving our risk management processes through the use of systems and better governance and the risk board. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think coming into looking at the reporting on quarter 3, I think that work in this area for us is really starting to show in the way that the report is presented to committee, in the way that actions are being input into the system and monitored. So I'm pleased with the way that the reporting of risk is going and the direction it's going, and I hope committee are finding this kind of layout of report and the way it's presented slightly easier to digest and navigate through. I won't take you through every single risk. Obviously, the narrative is there, but I do want to highlight there has been 2 increases in corporate risks in quarter 3. So the first of those, there has been quite a significant increase in the risk around capacity for service delivery. Now, this has increased from risk level 6 to risk level 12. Now, the reason for this, and I did allude to this in the last committee, so now that we are taking a kind of review of our ICT team. We now have an assistant director of digital who is skilled in this area. We're looking at what the team has, what the organisation needs in terms of its systems and its security. And we've done a bit of a look at the staffing capacity within the team at present to meet all the priorities and programmes that they have ongoing, and it has been identified that there was quite a significant capacity risk in the ICT team. This was also supported by the fact that we had a member of the team retire from the service. He was our programmer. He worked in the service for several years and was kind of key to some of our kind of internal systems. So at quarter 3, which remember we are backward reporting, the risk level in this area was quite high. You can see that there are some actions to try and improve this, and I am pleased to say, although it will come through in the Q4 update, that we have now looked at staffing issues in the ICT team. We have recruited a programmer. We are looking at the structure of the team more generally and the new roles that we may need to come into that team to support the service going forward. So we are taking action to mitigate that. The Assistant Director has also done quite a big piece of work just looking at prioritising projects within the ICT team and giving them some really kind of strong management and guidance to support them to make sure that we are prioritising the tasks across the ICT department. So that's the increase in that risk. Also flagged on there, you'll see as one of the actions, we had a bit of an issue with capacity in our waste team as well before Christmas. We have now carried out a recruitment exercise to increase capacity of our drivers and our loaders, and that is shortly coming to a close. So we have appointed through that, which should address some of the capacity issues in waste services and the reliance on agency budget to plug the gap. And then the other risk that has increased is risk number 9 on the register. Again, this is linked to ICT technology and again is linked to the capacity issues because obviously ICT is absolutely fundamental to the delivery of our services and the functioning of the organisation. So it will always be quite a high risk if there are impacts on that in terms of the ability to deliver that function. As I've said, we've already taken measures to review staffing requirements and look at additional roles coming into the new year. So that's the 2 areas that have increased. As I alluded to at the last committee, because I think Councillor Hughes asked a question in relation to it, the risk in this area was we expected it to go up because we had that intense focus on it. We had the experts in looking at it. We've had a review of it. So we did expect that there would be a slight increase in the risk level around this area. But also that's needed so that we can get the actions in place, know what we need to do to drive that risk down, which has been happening in Q4 and will be reported next time. So they're the specific 2 I wanted to highlight, but I'm happy to take any questions around any other or any other particular corporate risks, but none of the other risk levels have changed. None have decreased either, but none of the rest have changed. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. Any comments or questions? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Just sort of following on from the points you've made around the digital, the risks in ICT, the capacity issues. I mean, that is potentially very serious because ICT underpins so much of what the council is doing and the whole digital transformation strategy practically hinges on it. So I'm pleased that we are taking actions and I look forward to seeing improvements in future reports. And thank you very much for your explanation. It was very helpful.
You didn't, Councillor, you didn't, no. Anyone else? No? I think your comprehensive update has avoided any more questions. Fran, thank you. We'll move on then. Again, I'm happy to move the recommendations from the Chair, and the recommendations are that members note the current risk level and actions identified within the corporate risk register. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hughes, thank you. All those in favour with the recommendations? Yep, that's fine. You, okay, Councillor Hunt has abstained. Okay. We'll move to item 8 now, which is the Treasury Management Policy and Treasury Management Practices. This is another report, I think, is this you, Tina? Yes, as the Chief Finance and Section 151 Officer, I'll let you take it from there.
Thank you, Chair. This report is bringing to you the Treasury Management Policy Statement and the Treasury Management Practices in a combined schedule. Bit of background on this. In December 2021, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy issued a revised code of practice on their treasury management, which had strengthened requirements for skills and training and for investments, not specifically for treasury management purposes. It is a requirement that the Council should formally adopt the code, and as part of this requirement, the Council must formally adopt a treasury management policy statement which complies with the requirements of the SIPFA Treasury Management in Public Services Code of Practice, the code as we call it. The Council has therefore produced a Treasury Management Policy Statement and a Treasury Management Practices, a TMPP, in a combined schedule which is attached at Appendix 1. So this is the first time we've actually, although it's a requirement, we haven't had one of these in hard format before. We had a policy and we had practices that we adhered to, but we hadn't set it out in a schedule. So I think the internal audit that we had on Treasury Management, I think it wasn't last financial year, but the one before, actually made recommendations that we should implement this, bring it to Cabinet for approval, and set out all the risks associated with treasury management, which is what we are doing here. So the first part of the treasury management practices focuses on treasury management risks. There is a number of treasury management risks highlighted in TMP1. So the Council will adopt the key requirements of the code and will create and maintain this as a cornerstone for effective treasury management. It includes a treasury management policy statement which states the policies, objectives and approach to risk management of its treasury management capacities. Now, as part of this, there is some audit committee responsibilities and they are set out in section 3 of the report. So TMP5 in the appendix sets out the allocation of responsibilities and the Council's scheme of delegation of the treasury management practices. Audit committee's responsibilities are as follows, that they review the treasury management policy and procedures and make recommendations to the responsible body through the internal audit process. Now, because it's the first time we've actually documented one of these, the TMPP has actually been approved by Cabinet as part of the 25-26 budget process in February this year. So what this report requests is that Audit Committee agree to set up a working group to review the TMPP and bring any recommendations that it has to its committee meeting in June. Any changes to the TMPP can be presented to Cabinet for approval as part of its mid-year review. Going forward, Audit Committee will be asked to review the TMPP on an annual basis prior to Budget Cabinet. So as I said, the TMPP1 focuses on the risks and sets out the risks associated with treasury management and the policies used to mitigate against those risks. There's a number of risks. I'm not going to go through them in any great detail, but I'll just list what they are. So it's risks around credit and counterparty risks, liquidity risks, interest rate risks, exchange rate risks, refinancing risks, legal and regulatory risks, fraud, error and corruption risks, and market risks. Now that these risks have been formally identified, they will be added to the departmental risk registers and assigned to a corporate risk. So these will be evaluated each quarter and reported to Audit Committee on an exception basis, the same as what we do with every other risk in the balance scorecard. And this will be from Q1 next financial year. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Anything from members? I think it's probably straightforward. I suppose a good opportunity and welcome an opportunity for the working group to allow members to sort of take part in this review and have involvement, and hopefully we can work out the numbers of that after, perhaps one person from each group. And maybe, Jonathan, if you would like to be on as well, and we'll try and arrange it at a time that works for you. I think that would be really useful. So I think the officers will send out an email afterwards if we approve the recommendation. Yeah, sorry.
If I could just add something there. So last week we had the Treasury Management training for members. So it would be really useful if people want to be on the working group that you actually do attend that Treasury Management training if you haven't already. It is available online for you to have a look at now.
Okay, I'm happy then to move the recommendation. I'll read it out for those at home, that the committee agrees to set up a working group to review the Treasury Management Policy Statement and Treasury Management Practices set out in Appendix 1 and bring back any recommendations to the Audit Committee in June. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Yeah, Councillor Hunt, thank you. All those in favour of accepting the recommendations? Yeah, unanimous. Thank you. There are no urgent items for the meeting that I'm aware of, so I would say that the meeting is now closed. Have a good evening, everyone, and thank you.